History Matters.
Hello, everyone. This is Donna Rosenblum. I'm your host today at for our podcast. My special guest is Robert Wolfe, who's going to be talking about his book, Not Your Enemy, and we're going to have a lovely conversation dealing with echoes from the past. So, Robert, let's first get started by talking about when did you first learn or have an understanding of the Holocaust and what that meant as a young boy growing up in a home with two parents who are survivors?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your program, and thanks
Absolutely.
for the invitation to talk here at the beautiful HMTC of Nassau County. Didn't really think much of it as a kid, and we talk about that in the book discussion too. As a kid, it didn't come up that much. My mom and dad were Holocaust educators, but we'll call them Holocaust educators light because they were working on their careers, their new life in Michigan, where they ended up, where I was born and raised. Mm-hmm. And I was one of three Jewish people in my high school, which was about 40% African American. Mm-hmm. We had about 100 Jewish families in our community on the east side of Detroit, where my dad ended up delivering about 10,000 babies in his career, that's sort of the punchline, that's redemption. But not much, and I didn't really care that much about her. I was indifferent or just busy. Mm-hmm. College, medical school, career, family. Mm-hmm. But I did read his story once, maybe when I was probably 30 years ago. They went from typewriter to, from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer to disc. While it was a manuscript, I read his autobiography at the time and didn't think much of it, except his first escape. That kind of stuck in my mind for all my life. Flash forward, 1997, my dad passed away, unfortunately, 2016. My mom passes away. A historian friend from my hometown hands me, now it's on a disc, my dad's autobiography. She says, you got to read this. I didn't think much of it at the time. It took about a year to take care of my mom's affairs. Then I retired for a year. Then a friend, the gentleman I was just on the phone with, asked me to go back to work as a radiologist, which I've been doing for 35 years, and he needed help. So I was working from home out of Michigan, and that brought me to the disc. And so as a radiologist, we have two screens. The left screen is the patient list. The right screen are the images. And between cases, the left screen was my dad's autobiography, and the right screen I was dictating his biography. Mm-hmm. Because I thought these stories were so amazing, all the miracles, all the escapes, four-time escape artist, 20 miracles at least in this book. And I thought, this cannot stay on a disc. This can't stay on a computer. I have to share this with the world. So the motivation was there. And so it's been about a 6-7 year journey for me. And if you knew me 6 or 7 years ago, you'd say, this guy would never do this. I was never a writer. There was always science and math and anatomy. And that's how I was, we wrote, but it was always a professor that assigned us something to write for part of a paper, part of residency or whatever. But
So growing up, though, your parents, did they have any other survivor friends? Was there a survivor community that they were part of? Did you always know that there was this other group that they had almost like this special club that they were part of that you were not part of? Was that anything in growing up?
It's such a great question. My parents were very active in the Jewish community, in the medical community, in our synagogue, and very well respected and liked. And they had a huge variety of friends, Indian, Christian, Jewish. But yeah, they had a lot of friends from Eastern Europe, like they were from Hungary, and both survivors, like you said. Aggie Rubin comes to mind. You said we might have a guest here named Aggie.
Yes.
So Agatha, and she wrote her Holocaust memoirs from Auschwitz when she was a kid. Her whole family died around her, and it was hard to appreciate as a kid because you in your 20s and your 30s, there's a little narcissism, and you think you're going to live forever, and you're indefatigable, but it changes over time. We're more vulnerable. But yeah, my mom and dad were big time educators, and not just the Holocaust, the communist Hungary part of it, and history in general, the perils of not living in a free world, being able to vote, being able to practice religion. Most of that they didn't have when they were there, both under Nazi Hungary and communist Hungary. Jews were not allowed to get married on a typical Jewish ceremony.
Tradition, right.
We have a chapter about my mom's uncle getting arrested and tortured for 13 months and trying to get him to confess about the Raoul Wallenberg murder, and he wouldn't do it. So, and the forged papers that Wallenberg famously distributed, my dad and his friend Frank each got one, and didn't help them much at first, but it may have helped them down the road. It was like gold paper. So, big time educators, and I guess I got the bug. I mean, maybe I had a little burnout from it early on, but 6 or 7 years ago, I thought these messages are not only great, but also poignant to what's happening. And even now, with all this anti-Semitism going on, they wrote the stories as though they knew I would do this, and as though they knew that this would be a recurrent issue. And don't you hate it when your parents are right? So.
That's true. Okay, so let's talk about, you kind of analyze in your book discussion and your book talk certain themes of feelings. So you talk specifically about loneliness. So you want to maybe give us an understanding of why that theme is not only in the book, but is reoccurring in the book talk.
Well, loneliness, hope, determination, integrity are four of the main
points,
topics that but there's so many: resilience, determination, redemption, all of that. But loneliness was certainly there. It's palpable. When my dad had his first escape, you can feel it when he was running in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, not knowing where he was going, not knowing where his next meal was going to be from, not knowing if he was going to get shot or beaten or eaten by bears or wolves, but still escaped. And you can feel that. You feel the whole that fear and the whole cold, just the cold atmosphere behind it. A little spoiler: he and his friend Frank escaped twice from forced labor camps. Once in the middle of nowhere, and once in right downtown Budapest, in front of Nazi headquarters. And if he didn't have Frank, he would have had even more loneliness. You know, it was good to have a buddy like that. It's like having a teddy bear or whatever, somebody you can share your experiences with. So, but even as a kid, loneliness was an issue. He was an only child of only children. His dad used to beat him from time to time, mostly when he was late or if he wasn't keeping up with his grades. And then they didn't fit in with the Orthodox crowd either because they weren't Orthodox themselves. And his parents moved from Romania back to Hungary to Jur because they had mixed feelings about whether they should stay in Transylvania or be back to their native Hungary. And no matter what, they felt like they didn't fit in. So they weren't isolated people. My dad's parents were very nice to the general community. His dad he was a dentist, and he used to give freebies to the pro bono work for the less fortunate. And my dad's mom was generous too. She had conversations with the less fortunate, shared food, shared stories, and so they were undeserved of being of having to go to Auschwitz, which ultimately would happen to them at 50 years old while my dad was away at forced labor camp. So loneliness is pervasive throughout the book. My mom and dad were isolated in communist Hungary because they were too smart to fall for a lot of devious people that aligned with the communist, with the Russians and the communist manifesto. So they kept quiet about it, and they did their work. They came home. They kept to themselves. You didn't know if your phone was bugged. You didn't know there was cloak and dagger stories all the time. So they were sharp enough just to stay quiet. But that contributes to loneliness, and also you didn't have a choice under Nazi Hungary. You couldn't go out you couldn't shop at certain hours. You had to wear those ridiculous yellow stars and then you were shunned ultimately because that chain of thought just kept going down the ladder from the government and the military and the police all the way down to the people. So,
all right. So let's just so that our audience kind of has a grasp of the time frame and the timeline that we're talking about. So obviously, Hungary undergoes Nazi occupation much later. Hungary was an ally of Germany, and it wasn't until March of 1944 that the Nazis come in and the real terror for Jews began, in Hungary. It wasn't that it was a picnic before that time, but, the beginning of the end begins in March of 1944. So your parents are living in Budapest. Are they in Pest, the Pest part of Budapest?
No, they were in Jur. My dad wasn't married yet. My mom was 11 years younger than my dad. So my mom, her story was less adventurous, but she hid the whole time with her mom, grandmother, sometimes grandfather and uncle. But for Dad, he was out at forced labor camp. He left in October of '43, so he was away. But yeah, you know your history, and that little short period of time was when most of the Hungarians were killed. Most of them went straight to Auschwitz and killed immediately. So my dad's mom, and it's a miracle, another miracle. My dad knows their whereabouts. what happened to them. And his mom died immediately as soon as they got off the train. She had an orphan with her and thought maybe that would buy her some time and the kid, but it was no such thing. They went straight to the gas chamber. And his dad died about a week later, and it's a horrible way to get probably cholera from cleaning people's feces and from the barracks, but at least they weren't there months at a time getting humiliated and tortured. We talk about humiliation a lot too in our talks, but tortured, humiliated, and watching other people the same way, heads shaved, rabbis, clowns, very sad. And so that's that was a very terrible time. And it matches up a little bit with 1942 when, I guess when the Nazis were losing or had this perception of losing the war, that's when they sped up and accelerated the murder, the genocide.
Right, so we talk about in one of the last podcasts that I was doing, we were talking about the idea that there were really two wars going on during this time frame. You have the combat war of countries fighting in World War II, and then you have the final solution war, which was going on simultaneously. And sometimes it's hard, historians, to wrap their heads around the fact that here Germany, 42 into 43, are beginning to lose, and yet they don't stop the final solution. They don't, if they had stopped and put all of their effort and resources into winning the war, they could have always come back to the final solution at another point in time. But there's no logic. The part of the Holocaust is that you cannot wrap your head around these things that happened. There's no understanding that you go from point A to point B. It is a very, very complicated and difficult subject. So when your father goes into hiding, and then the war ends, now he's living under communism. So what happens then for him?
Well, he was kind of in no man's land. I mean, he was lucky. He was relatively free. He was repairing bicycles, and it was a Christian guy that owned the shop, and very nice to my dad and others. And when the war ended, they were hiding. And
how old was your dad at this time?
Well, 20. He was born in 1922, so he was 21, 22 when he was going through all of this.
Okay.
But he didn't have to hide. He just had to sort of lay low, I guess, if that's the right, because only about 5% of forced laborers survived, and most of them were considered prisoners of war. So they went to the POW camps. Right. But my dad was I can't say free because he couldn't go back to his hometown Győr. He was in the Budapest area, but the war didn't end in Győr until a few months down the road, so he couldn't even go back to his hometown. And they had people, their Aerocross, the renowned Aerocross, which I don't know, maybe they're akin to the Gestapo or the KGB. And my dad always used to say that they were worse to the Jews than the Nazis themselves. So he still had to look over his shoulder. There was no sense of freedom. And like you said, under communism, they were always looking over their back. And but they were short of doctors in Hungary because of all the mass genocide. So there was an allotment, there was a quota, and 10% of the medical students could be Jewish. And my dad it's another miracle how my dad got into medical school, but he did. And so most of his time then was as a medical student resident, and then finally practicing OBGYN, still under communist rule, up until 1956 when they escaped. Hungarian Revolution happened, things changed, and they had enough. Enough was enough. So, and on that note, my mom's mom with her stepfather were in Israel at the time. The stepfather met them in Vienna after their final escape, which was a harrowing escape, and wanted them to go to Israel where they were. But Israel was in the middle of the Sinai War, and they said 2 wars is enough. I'm not. Yeah. So they decided to come to the United States instead.
Did they have anybody here that sponsored them? What was their connection to the United States?
My mom's father was here, and that's if we ever do a part 2 of the book, which wouldn't be as exciting, but it has great stories. That he met them at Ellis Island, and they did their paperwork, seemingly not difficult, and then they took them to Providence, Rhode Island, where they were kind of lost because they didn't speak much English, and he had been remarried by then, and there was a strained relationship between. My mom hadn't seen him in 18 years, so they got a divorce to protect the family name, which is an interesting concept. They lived. One went to Israel, the other went to New York. He also ended up in England and ultimately Los Angeles, married a few times, but strained relationship, no job, nowhere to go. And my parents said enough is enough. That my dad still wanted to be a doctor, so he ended up redoing his residency at the Beth Israel, a Harvard affiliate in Boston, which is amazing if you think about it, because I couldn't get into the Beth Israel or any Harvard affiliate in any specialty. And here he is, barely speaks English, but he must have had a good reputation because he made it through. And then ultimately Detroit, because my mom's father was the connection.
Right.
And the funny story out of that is it's in part 2. The funny story is that they had a flat tire when they were done processing their paperwork, and so they had to call AAA or whatever they had back then. And that's kind of how I wanted to end the book, because with a big laugh, like,
Right.
you look at a flat tire, God forbid we get one here in I-95 around here where,
Right.
we go crazy. It just ruins your whole day. But for them, a flat tire would seem like nothing.
It was nothing, right. So how many languages did your parents, were they able to speak?
That's a great
Obviously,
question.
Hungarian, and then they learned English.
Their
but-
English was better than most Americans that I know, so they were well-read people and diversified. They liked museums, art, travel, education, you name it, general history, travel, all of that. So they spoke English and Hungarian. They had heavy Hungarian accents, but their English was excellent. My dad spoke a little French and German, a little bit of Swedish. They both spoke a little bit of Russian, out of necessity, I suppose.
Any Yiddish?
No, that's ironically no. And my mom knew a little bit of Hebrew. My temple was Orthodox. My bar mitzvah was through an Orthodox rabbi, but then they raised it to build an assisted living place, and it ended up being a conservative shul. But that was right after my bar mitzvah. I was one of the last ones in that. That was a 1909 building. So no, but English and Hungarian, and they never taught me Hungarian, interestingly, because as much as they loved Mother Hungary, part of it was they'd have their secret language, so I wouldn't understand, and part of it was they wanted to put that part of their lives behind them.
Right. Perfectly understandable.
Of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's jump to today. All right. How do you feel about what's been happening in the world, the rise in anti-Semitism? I mean, I know that this is a mission for you. This is not something you do. It's not about, we were talking about that when you're involved in Holocaust education. It's not about the money. You're doing it because you're passionate, you feel committed, you want to carry on the stories. This is something that you're doing for your parents. How does, I mean, as wonderful as that is, and that's warm and it's feel good, how do you feel in today's world dealing with what's going on?
Well, it's disgusting, for one thing. I mean, as a radiologist, we're into the preservation of life, helping people, the beauty of the cell, the beauty of the anatomy, not just in humans, but pets, dogs, cats, giraffes, you name it. And these people, they don't think twice about chopping your head off or shooting you, and it's paralleled. I mean, it's the same thing. It's a different enemy, but it's really disgusting. And they're wasting their time, if you ask me. Fortunately, the military now and the police are not pointing the guns at us. They're protecting us for now. Right. I hope it never changes that way, because another lesson in the book is whatever happened to my dad could happen to any one of us. It could be a bad neighbor, a bad business deal, local government, federal government, foreign government, natural disaster. So that's another lesson, is that we all feel Hamas, and then people that are lauding Hitler, LGBTQ population, African Americans. You guys were next. I mean, the Jewish people were they were systematically exterminated, but you were next on. It wasn't going to end there. You guys, and they did torture and persecute and murder homosexuals and other groups that were
and mentally and physically
disabled and babies, people that weren't
Jehovah's
useful.
Witnesses, and
so
there was a whole race theory,
and it's disgusting, because over 100 years or 80 years or even 1,000 years, we've, as humans, instead of going forward, they're finding new ways to torture each other, to persecute, to rob, steal from, and to murder each other, and that's the saddest part of it. So I'm just doing my part in just trying to recruit people. 99% plus of us don't think like these murders and these, but the idea is to recruit people to go see your congressman. To if you see an issue, report it. And invite me for a book talk, or read the book and write a review and say how poignant these topics are. Even though it's a different time and place, it's the same thing. It's fear.
We always have to be very conscious that when anybody is persecuted, everyone is being persecuted, and it doesn't matter what the group of people is that is being targeted. There's no safety. We know hate does not draw a line. It is all over the place, and as the human race, we have to really step up, and we have to be there for anyone, no matter what.
Absolutely.
And that's very, very imperative. But
You bring up a good point. Part of this journey is meeting great people like you and the people here in this wonderful place. But part of the bad side is that there's apathy and indifference. And if we had armored trucks and armored cars and those ugly flags, those the red, black, and white flags going in the streets of New York and Florida, we'd think differently, because if it doesn't affect you, you tend to be less involved with it. But when I get reviews of the book, or people that reach out to say, well, you got to do this talk, or this book's changed me, that's what makes it it makes it worth doing. So.
Education is paramount, and that's what we do here. That's our mission. We want people to understand the lessons of the Holocaust. We want people to understand what racism and persecution look like, and that's what we have to do. So, we're going to fight that fight for as long as we have to fight the fight.
I appreciate it.
And it might be forever. Who knows? But
it probably will be. But we had Islamophobia after 9/11. And
absolutely.
These Holocaust deniers, and I'm not into Islamophobia. And I've got a lot of Muslim friends. I've got Asian friends.
Of course,
African American.
Right.
And I got that from my parents. They were always, instead of shunning other groups, they were always interested in reaching out and learning about their background, learning about learning about their culture, and just extremely interested in it, and engaging people rather than isolating people, which is it's just not right. And so I do the same thing, and no, it's great. My Muslim buddy, he was my assistant at a Greek Orthodox church book presentation. I might have mentioned that to you yesterday, and that was so cool that we got a Jewish guy and a Muslim guy talking about my dad's book at a Greek Orthodox church, and the priest there, one of my best friends from my freshman year in high school, so they got to meet, and it's just a wonderful experience, and they all are, and I'm glad people are receptive to what we're trying to say, because it's an important message.
Absolutely. So let's end with the concept of hope, because I think hope is a wonderful way to wake up every day and have hope. And I do believe that we live in a wonderful world that has wonderful relationships and community, and that there is a lot of hope in the world. We want people to see that. So maybe. What are your words of wisdom when it comes to hope?
I couldn't say it better than you did, but I mean, my dad's integrity and his hope were paramount. They were paramount. If he didn't have the hope, he wouldn't have survived. And so that was then, and just that determination. And I think there is hope for our society. At least we're not at that point where we've got the armored trucks and people pointing their guns at us. And there's hope for a civilized attitude towards each other. There's hope that we should assist each other and laud each other's successes.
And respect.
Respect is a big word too, and I don't use that word enough, but respect is a big part of it. And look, my hope is, if I didn't have any hope, I wouldn't be doing this.
Of course,
right? I mean,
we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't get up every day.
I'm a retired radiologist. I should be chasing golf balls.
All right, you could be sitting on the beach every day.
All of it. So.
So it is paramount, and I think for many second generation, for telling stories that deal with the Holocaust, hope is just a very integral part. Almost all the survivors that still come to our center and speak, that's the message they want kids to take away, that there's hope for a better world, and that the better world starts with them, and that they need to play their part. That they need to be able to be educated, and they need to be active citizens, and they need to rise up, and they need to understand what's going on around them.
I agree. I always say that I really want the book to be taught in the classroom, and we're working hard at that. And I've got my first university talk coming up, which is so exciting, University of South Carolina, and that'll be zoomed out to a couple of campuses, and hopefully that's a nice a foot in the door and I've done the U.S. Holocaust Museum in D.C., this place, the Illinois Holocaust Museum, and I hope to get a lot more of those. And education starts at home, and I was well educated. My parents cared, and so did their friends and neighbors, and I'm just trying to spread that message. It's just too important to let go by.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on our show today, Echoes of the Past, and Robert has done such a fantastic job. Please definitely take a look at the book, and it's on. Where can they find it if they need to?
Well, you can buy it here if you're in the Long Island area, and the Holocaust museums I just mentioned, and the Zeckelman Center, which is in my original home state of Michigan.
Right, but it's on Amazon,
Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Tufts University, my other alma mater. hopefully Yale sooner rather than later. I'm in talks with Yale now, so that's another alma mater.
That is great. So
you can't miss it. If you Google Not a Real Enemy or Robert J. Wolfe, MD, you'll find the book. And
wonderful.
You'll enjoy it too.
Okay. Thank you so much. So everyone, please be sure to subscribe, share, and stay connected for more engaging conversations. And until next time, have a lovely day. Thank you so much.